So let me just tell you a little bit about it. These albums, I'll tell you to sort of give you an education about them, a little lesson in albums. Back in the olden times, back in the ancient days, we had these things called albums. What the word was now was what we would do back in those times, back in the olden days. We would go into these things called recording studios. And they had these big recording machines that had these reels of tape, usually 2 inches wide. And these tapes would go around in reels, back and forth, and you would what they called record tracks onto these tapes. And then you take these big tapes and take them to a place called a mastering plant, and they would make out of these tapes a thing called an acetate. Anyway, you take this acetate, then you take it out of this building, and then you go to another place. And this was called, in those days, now we don't have these anymore, but they were called a record factory. I know, factories are these places where people make things. We don't have them anymore in the States, or probably here either. Back in those days, yeah, and a record factory, of course, made records. So what you would do is you take your acetates into this record plant, into this record factory, and they would take these tapes and somehow they would connect them to these big, huge machines. And these machines had these round pieces of vinyl plastic on them. And onto these round pieces of vinyl plastic, they would take and cut grooves into them. Now these grooves somehow magically would wait a minute, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me just finish this story. First, then after that, okay, you make these records. Then they put them in what was called a record sleeve, a record cover. What this was usually was this sort of square thing, 12 inches by 12 inches, and had a picture of the artist on the front usually. Some liner notes in the back, read about what these people did and stuff to make these records. Anyway, after this record was all done, they just put it in this plastic stuff, this called shrink wrap, and then what you could do with this record was you could put it on a thing that was called this turntable, and it'd spin around, and it had this arm on it. You won't believe this. Absolutely out of my mind. This thing was this electric arm thing, and on the end of it, it had this little needle. And you'd take this needle, and you'd stick it on this rotating piece of vinyl plastic, and it would make this beautiful sounds. Now, where you would get these records after you made them, this is where it gets really crazy, and I know I think some of you would believe me and some of you don't. But anyway, what we would do with these records after we made them at this record factory thing, this record factory back in the olden times, then what you would do is we would take these to these places that were called record stores. All right. These record stores were cool places, They had all these, cool records laying around, and you could go in there and leaf through them. And usually they had them; they were owned by a real human being, one person. And this person was usually an elderly fellow. He's almost always a man, and he sort of looked like he was a little overweight usually, and he sort of looked like like Allen Ginsberg's father, And anyway, he knew everything. This guy knew everything. And he talked, he actually would talk to you. He'd talk to you. He'd tell you this and that about the record. So this produced by this guy, written by this person, this record's better than this one, It was a fantastic experience. It was like a social experience. But anyway, this is where, if you believe me so far, you might believe this last thing. If you doubt me so far, you won't believe anything I say here. When we were all done talking to this record store owner, this guy, this old guy with a beard and stuff, after we get done doing that, we would actually buy this record with a thing called money. Harvestmen, shine on down. The chill in the air likes to ghost of the ground. Northern winds, I hear your voice, but killing frost makes all love a choice. harvest moon, take me down for a while. Said a harvest moon, sicknesses now you can stop. Crystal tank, glory stream, this ain't the way that the blue fish swim. Another strap, silver heart, rain in time for eternal fire. Say a harvest moon, take me down for a